Hello viewers, welcome to Through Time channel. Imagine a world plunged into endless night, where survival meant constant struggle against the cold and lurking predators. Now, picture a flicker, a spark, and suddenly everything changes. This is the story of humanity's most pivotal discovery, a moment that didn't just illuminate the darkness, but forged the very foundations of our civilization. Before fire, the world belonged to the night. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, our ancestors huddled together in caves and rock shelters, listening to sounds they couldn't see: the roar of a predator, the snap of a branch, the rustle of something moving just beyond the edge of perception. Darkness wasn't peaceful. It was filled with teeth and claws and death. Survival was brutal. Food was eaten raw. Tough roots, stringy meat, whatever could be scavenged or hunted during precious daylight hours. There was no way to preserve it, no way to make it easier to digest. Your jaw ached from constant chewing, your stomach cramped from parasites and bacteria that thrived in uncooked flesh. Hunger was a constant companion, because so much energy was spent just processing what you ate. Cold was equally merciless. When winter came, it killed the weak, the young, the elderly. Your body burned calories desperately trying to maintain warmth, calories you could barely afford to lose. You sought shelter wherever you could find it. Caves occupied by bears, overhangs shared with leopards, any refuge from wind and rain and snow. But these weren't homes. They were temporary hiding places in a world that wanted you dead. You were not the apex predator. Not yet. Saber-toothed cats, cave bears, hyenas hunting in packs, they owned the night. They had fangs and speed and senses far sharper than yours. Your only advantages were your brain, your hands, and sheer stubborn will to survive another day. Then one day, perhaps 1,000,000 years ago, perhaps even longer, everything changed. Maybe it was a lightning strike that ignited a dry savanna, turning the landscape into a roaring inferno. Maybe it was a volcanic eruption, rivers of molten rock flowing down mountainsides, setting everything ablaze. Or maybe it was simply friction, a fallen tree grinding against rock during an earthquake, producing sparks that caught on dried grass. However it happened, there was a moment when an early human saw fire for the first time. Not as a distant glow on the horizon, not as something happening far away, but up close, near enough to feel its heat, near enough to see the dancing flames, orange and yellow and white, consuming everything they touched, near enough to hear its voice, the crackling, the roaring, the hissing as moisture turned to steam. The initial reaction was surely terror. Every instinct screamed to run. Animals scattered in panic, fleeing the advancing wall of heat and light. Fire was a force of nature, as fearsome as any predator, more destructive than any storm. It consumed entire forests. It left nothing but ash and blackened earth in its wake. But somewhere, someone didn't run. Someone stayed just beyond the flames, watching. Perhaps they were too curious, perhaps too exhausted to flee. Or maybe, just maybe, something deeper, some spark of human consciousness, whispered that this terrifying force might be understood. They watched as the fire moved, following the wind, feeding on dry vegetation. They noticed that it avoided bare rock and water. They saw how it grew weaker as it exhausted its fuel, how embers glowed long after the flames had died. They might have noticed something else too. Yeah, the smell. The incredible, intoxicating smell of cooking meat. Animals caught in the blaze, their flesh transformed by heat into something tender, aromatic, utterly different from the tough, raw meat they knew. Approaching a natural fire for the first time required courage beyond anything we can imagine. Every instinct said danger, but human curiosity, human hunger for understanding, human desire for control, these proved stronger than fear. Someone reached toward an ember, feeling its warmth. They recoiled from its burn, but tried again, more carefully this time. Picking up a branch with its end glowing red, they carried it away from the dying fire. They watched as the ember faded, turned to ash, and went cold. And then came the revelation: fire could die, but it could also be kept alive. Feed it dry grass and it flares. Add branches and it sustains. Blow gently and it brightens. Smother it and it suffocates. Fire was not a mysterious, uncontrollable force. It was something that could be nurtured, maintained, managed. It had needs, like any living thing. Meet those needs and it would serve you. The first humans to keep fire alive became something new. They were no longer merely observers of nature's power. They were its stewards. They carried embers wrapped in moss and leaves, protected from rain and wind. They built hearths where coals could be carefully tended, never allowed to go completely cold. Losing fire meant starting over, waiting for lightning or finding another natural blaze. So fire became precious, something to be guarded, protected, passed from one generation to the next. And as they learned to keep fire, they learned to use it. Warmth came first. No longer did the cold nights drive them into desperate huddles. A fire at the cave entrance provided heat that penetrated deep into the shelter. Children stopped dying from exposure. The elderly survived winters they would never have endured before. And something unexpected happened. People gathered around the fire. They sat together, shared food, communicated. The hearth became humanity's first social center, the place where stories were told, knowledge was passed down, bonds were strengthened. The range of habitable territory expanded dramatically. Northern climates, previously deadly during winter, became survivable. Humans began migrating into Europe, Asia, regions that would have been impossible without fire. We were no longer limited to tropical and subtropical zones. We could go anywhere as long as we brought fire with us. Food was, completely revolutionized. Cooking wasn't just about taste, it was about survival. Heat broke down tough fibers in plants and meat, making them so much easier to chew and digest. It killed parasites and bacteria that caused disease. It allowed humans to, extract more calories and nutrients from the same amount of food. Our bodies evolved in response. Smaller jaws, smaller teeth, and shorter digestive tracts. We no longer needed the massive grinding molars of our ancestors, or the long intestines required to process raw vegetation. The energy saved on digestion could be redirected elsewhere, into bigger brains, longer childhoods, and more complex social behaviors. Cooked food meant, honestly, more varied diets. Toxic plants became edible once heated. Hard seeds and roots could be softened. Even bones could be cracked open and their marrow made accessible. Starvation became less common because more resources could be exploited. Protection, it transformed overnight. A fire at the cave entrance was an impenetrable barrier to predators. Lions, hyenas, bears, none would cross that threshold of light and heat. For the first time in millions of years, humans could sleep through the night without constant vigilance. That rest, that relief from perpetual anxiety, changed us. It gave us the mental space to think beyond immediate survival, to plan, to imagine, to create. But fire was just the beginning. Once we understood fire, we began to experiment. What happens when you heat stone? It flakes more predictably, making better tools. What about clay? It hardens into pottery, vessels for storage and cooking. And metal-bearing rocks? They release copper, tin, iron, materials that would build entire civilizations. Fire enabled metallurgy, which enabled agriculture at scale, which enabled cities, which enabled everything that followed. Every technological leap in human history traces back, in some way, to that first controlled flame. Fire fundamentally reshaped human biology. Our brains grew larger, fueled by the extra calories cooking provided. Our social structures became more complex, organized around communal hearths. Our migration patterns shifted as fire made previously uninhabitable regions accessible. We became a species defined not just by our biology, but by our tools. And fire was the first and most important tool we ever mastered. From a primal fear to the very essence of civilization, fire remains with us. It powers our engines, generates our electricity, launches our spacecraft. Every time you flick a light switch or start your car, you're channeling the same force our ancestors first harnessed 1,000,000 years ago. That ancient human who decided to approach the flames rather than flee, who chose curiosity over fear, who dared to reach for an ember. They didn't just discover fire. They discovered what it means to be human, to see the world not as it is, but as it could be. To transform fear into understanding, to take what nature provides and reshape it for our purposes. Fire didn't just warm our bodies, it ignited our minds. It showed us that we weren't helpless victims of the natural world. We could be its masters. Every candle you light, every campfire you sit around, every warm home you return to, they all echo that primordial moment when light pushed back the darkness and humanity took its first step toward becoming something more than just another animal struggling to survive. This is the legacy of fire. This is Through Time. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to Through Time and share this journey with others, because understanding where we came from, the struggles, the fears, the incredible courage of our ancestors helps us appreciate everything we have today and, everything we might still become.